Imagine you're going on a picnic. Now, you'll definitely have to use your imagination if your day is as wet as it is here today. So, we're going on a picnic. It's nice and sunny. You've laid out your picnic blanket and your family have bought a big basket full of food. I wonder what you're hoping is going to be in this basket. What are your favourite foods? Not just on a picnic, but if you could have any meal from anywhere, what would you have? Why don't you have a chat with the people at home about your favourite foods? Press pause on me while you do it, and then when you're ready, press play again, and we'll find out about a big picnic in the Bible. I wonder what you decided to eat. I think probably if I had the choice, I would have roast pork and lots of roast parsnips. I love parsnips. I've even been known to have a whole meal just of parsnips. I wonder if there were any parsnips in your picnic basket. Well, today's story about a picnic from the Bible is a story that lots of us, particularly the adults, are going to know really well. And the problem with that story, those kind of stories sometimes, is we think we know it all. We know it inside out and back to front. But actually the truth of it is that God can still teach us new things, even from the stories in the Bible that we know really well. Or he can remind us about something that he wants us to remember and think about today. So as we start, say a quick prayer in your heart and in your head that God will teach you something new or remind you about something that will help you today. Now, we are going to draw along as we think about this story today. So you will need some paper and some pens. It doesn't need to be anything fancy. And then as I tell the story, I'm going to encourage you to draw the picture that you're imagining of this story taking place. And so your picture will grow as the story goes along. So press pause, make sure you've got some paper and pens, and then press play again, and we'll get on with the story. Okay, so hopefully you've got some paper and you've got some pens or pencils or crayons, whatever you've got. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell the story and I'm going to leave short pauses, but it definitely won't be long enough for you to draw your picture. So what you'll need to do is press pause as we go on different parts of the story and press play again when you're ready to restart. And what's going to happen is your picture is going to change and grow as different parts of the story are added to it. Now, this story is from Luke chapter 9 in the Bible, so you can read it for yourself later. And the story starts with Jesus. It starts with Jesus and the disciples. There are 12 of them. And it starts with Jesus and his disciples on a mountainside. And it starts with Jesus feeling tired. He's been busy. He's been working hard, telling people about God, showing them about God by doing some amazing, miraculous things, including making people better. So, I wonder what a tired Jesus would look like to you. But Jesus and the disciples weren't on their own because a large crowd of people had followed them onto the mountainside. They were really keen. They were hungry to see what Jesus would do next. They'd heard him say incredible things. They'd seen him do amazing things, and they wanted to see and hear more. They were excited about the good news that Jesus had. So you need to draw a large crowd. Now you know that this story is called the feeding of the 5,000. Well, that was 5,000 men, is how it's recorded in the Bible. Now, some of these men will have definitely had wives. So there would have been women there, and some of these men and women, husband and wives, would have had children as well. So it's not just 5,000 men, there were lots of women and children there too. Now, I don't know how big your piece of paper is, but you're probably not going to be able to draw that many people. So you need to just draw a crowd of people listening to Jesus, waiting for him to say and do something amazing again. So draw a big crowd of people. And they were listening to Jesus as he told amazing stories. And it was starting to get later, and it was starting to get maybe a bit dark. I wonder how you're going to draw that in your picture. And one of the disciples said to Jesus, they came up and said to him, Jesus, I think you should let and send everybody home because they must be hungry. It's time for their tea. But Jesus had a different plan. He said, no, we're going to feed them now. I wonder what the disciples thought of that. I imagine they were a bit puzzled because there was no big food truck. They didn't have lots and lots of picnic baskets. Definitely no picnic baskets filled up with roast parsnips. I wonder how they thought he was going to do it. You might want to draw some puzzled disciples here. I wonder what they look like. Well, Jesus told them to get everybody to sit down. So all of the crowd are sitting down now. That might change your picture. And he told the disciples to go and see who had some food and to bring it to him. So the disciples went searching. Do you want to draw them looking for the food? Well, they found a little boy who had a packed lunch. You're definitely going to need to draw him. Now, I wonder, was his packed lunch in a basket? Was it wrapped up in some material? Or was he just holding it? You decide. But he had 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. So draw the little boy with his loaves and with his fish, showing them to Jesus. I wonder what the crowd thought at this point, or what even the disciples thought at this point, because obviously this food was meant for this little boy. It wasn't meant to feed a whole crowd. But Jesus took the food in his hands and he held up his arms and he said, thank you to God for the food. Do you want to draw Jesus saying thank you to God for the food? And after he prayed to God, Jesus started breaking up the bread and handing it out to the disciples. And he broke up the fish and handed it out to the disciples. And the disciples handed the bread out to the crowd. And the disciples handed out the fish to the crowd. And everybody was eating and everybody was having enough. And maybe some people even had seconds or even thirds. So you need to draw everybody with food in their hands and big full mouths of food and full tummies too. And there was so much food that there was even leftovers. I wonder if you can remember how many leftovers there were. Well, there was enough to fill 12 baskets. So I'm going to encourage you to draw the 12 baskets with some bread and fish picking out of the top. But while you do that, and while you finish off the rest of your picture, why don't you chat about these 3 questions as you finish off your drawing? So first of all, what's your favourite part of this story? What's the bit you like the best? Number 2, if you had been in the crowd that day, listening to Jesus and then being given some food in an amazing way, how would you have felt about what had happened? And then number 3, what do you think this story shows us about Jesus, about what Jesus is like? So have a think about those 3 questions, about your favourite part of the story, what it would have felt like to be in the crowd, and what do you think this story tells us about who Jesus is? Chat about those as you finish off your picture and then press play on me again. I think my favourite part of that story is how confused the disciples are when Jesus tells them to get everybody to sit down and that he's going to provide the food. Because even though they'd seen Jesus do some incredible stuff and say some amazing things, they still didn't fully understand who he was. Now, we're helped by the fact that we can read lots of more stories in the Bible, and we know personally about who Jesus is and how he can help us. But even then, I'm sometimes not sure how he can help me. But the thing I do is to pray to God for help. And I'm not even sure what I'm asking for sometimes, but I know I need God's help. And then when I look back at those times, a bit like I guess if the disciples looked back at that time when they had been with Jesus on the mountainside and he had fed all of those people, I can see how God was at work. God was at work on this day on the mountainside, and God has been at work when I have asked him for help as well. So you might want to spend some time now praying to God and asking him for help. You might want to one day this week have a picnic, probably indoors, but if you wrap up warm and it's dry, why not outside? So maybe that's an idea for lunch one day this week as you're at home. You might even want to make some tuna sandwiches to remind you of the story. If you've played on the Guardians of Ancora app before, or even if you haven't, then you might want to play the story and the game for this story on today. And you can find that on the Guardians of Ancora app. And finally, you might want to think about that little boy who didn't have very much, but offered it to Jesus, and Jesus used it to help lots of people. And lots of people, not just to feel full in their tummies, but to have an idea of who Jesus was and what he could do. So you might want to have a think about, what do you have that you could give to God for God to use to help other people? And if you're not sure of that answer, because that is a big question, then what you might want to do is spend some time now chatting to God about the things you want to say to him, and catching from God about the things he wants to say to you. And you might want to ask God a catch question, which is, God, what have I got that I can give to you for you to use? And then why don't you spend some time catching what he wants to say to you? Give that a go and have a great week.